Hello once again, and I'm back with another video about my brother and why I thought he was on the spectrum. And today I wanted to talk about his past, and I'm gonna go from, say, I guess his birth up to the point where he was old enough to get a job. I'm gonna try to keep it under half an hour because I just want to highlight, I guess, a few things here and there. But just a bit of background, he was born in 1977 to two parents who probably should never have been married because they never really showed much affection for each other, also didn't show a whole lot of interest in parenting. And I know this because I joined 2 years after, or 1 year and 11 months to be exact. So since I wasn't around for that first 1 year and 11 months, I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I do know that he was sick for some time, I believe. Spent some time at hospital with pneumonia. And of course, while I wasn't there yet, he got my parents' undivided attention, whatever that looked like. And then I was born, and then he turned out to be very jealous of the fact that there was now somebody else. And I have a photo somewhere of my crib with all of his toys in it and the toy box on top for good measure. And I was actually underneath that, apparently. And this is a day and age where people didn't have phones on them that could take pictures, so my mother actually went to the cabinet where they kept their camera, had to check if it had film, and then walked back up to the nursery to take a picture of me under there before actually deciding to get me out underneath all that stuff. Mind you, at the time I was a newborn, so that choice was already quite interesting. But okay, so that wasn't his fault that happened, but he was very jealous, and I've always noticed that growing up as well. Though I have to say, my mother was definitely mostly on his side, but that didn't really seem to matter. He just needed everybody on his side, not just my mother. But I knew him while I was growing up as somebody who was very unpredictable, very sensitive, fairly violent, mostly towards me, but also towards himself. He would be very sensitive about certain things. I was not allowed in his room whatsoever, wasn't allowed to touch his stuff, wasn't even allowed to look at anything. But of course, the other way around, he did feel like he was allowed to do all those things, and he would regularly do so as well. But coming back to the violence real quick, he would want to get his mother's attention, and he knew that he would get a lot of attention from her if he did something that would shock her. So I have a memory of him basically headbutting a wall. Now these are walls made out of cement, not wooden walls. Most houses in Europe are brick and cement, mortar, that type of thing. So he would headbutt a wall, making sure that she saw him do that. And then as she came rushing over, all upset and shocked, he would start chuckling at her because he thought that was funny somehow. And he did stuff like that more often. Like outrageously violent or just wild things. And I knew not to upset him too much because I knew that if he started like hitting you or stuff like that, he didn't really know how to pull his punches or anything like that. If I were to like slap at him or something because I was annoyed with him, I knew for a fact that whatever he did for retaliation was going to be 10 times worse. So he knew after a while to not do that. So he was pretty sensitive in a lot of ways. He was very much a stickler for the rules. In particular, he did not like when other people did not follow the rules if he had followed them himself, albeit under protest. He would feel very much put down upon if other people were seen to get advantages that he did not have. He did not handle strangers very well, did not like when people talked to him that he didn't know, didn't like when I spoke to strangers either in his presence. I don't know why. I kind of felt like even though he was jealous of me and he often argued with me for no particular reason, I was not allowed to go and hang out with other people as well, or either. Like I was supposed to be the safe space in that regard. But growing up as a teen as well, he did not want me to tell any of my friends that I even had a brother. Like some friends already knew that, but if he found out that I'd been talking about him, even if it was like a neutral mention, he would be very, very upset. Did not want any of that. Because I think in his teenage years, a lot of insecurities like came to a head, and he was very much depressed. This was also the time that my parents got a divorce. He was very like upset about that. He did not know how to handle that. I don't think he ever actually processed that. This was also the time where he became a terror at school. We were in middle school, and he had literally at one point grabbed a kid that was taunting him, like grabbed him by the neck and shoved him up against the wall so that his feet were off the ground, and that really scared a lot of people, of course. But this is the 90s, and people didn't really call the cops and stuff like that about these types of incidents. And I don't think he ever got like suspension or anything like that. It just kind of happened. I don't think anybody talked to him because I'm pretty sure some teachers were already quite aware of how difficult he could be, and they probably didn't want to touch that. But I know that a lot of people kind of left him alone after that when he proved to be quite dangerous, like not just easily upset and start raging, he would just also physically grab you if you were too annoying. And like I said, he was very sensitive about people getting advantages that he thought he wasn't getting. And that could be anything. And you could do anything that seemed perfectly neutral and innocuous, and it will be upsetting to him because I recall having to walk on a lot of eggshells around him. Now, since my parents were divorced, that meant that he lived with my dad for most of his teenage years and into his early adulthood until he finally moved into his own place. And I lived with my mom, so we didn't quite see each other during the week. We would only see each other on the weekends. I would go to my dad's one weekend. He would come to us at my mom's place the other weekend. And for many years during that time, I would say at least 5, maybe even 10 years, I had at some point done something that he found so horrendous that he didn't even want to acknowledge my existence for a couple of years there. He would pretend that I wasn't there, he wouldn't react, he would not speak of me. He would try to annoy me in other ways, like try to get into my room. I had a door with a lock specifically because he would try to do that. The way that I noticed in particular that he was on the spectrum, not that I actually said it like that to myself at the time, I didn't really know anything about autism at the time, but I knew something was wrong with him because he would move very stiffly. He would always try, I guess, to be as much in control of his movements as possible, and that made him actually appear very wooden. That also translated to how he spoke. It would be very short sentences, almost at a whisper, like a low murmur. He didn't want anybody else to hear him outside of the person that he was directly talking to, and often that person wouldn't be able to understand him either. He would try to be very correct in everything, and that just made him very stiff and unyielding. And my parents had 2 very different reactions to that. On the one hand, my mother completely stuck her head in the sand, and she was like, oh, it's just a phase. He just needs to grow up. He needs to get a girlfriend. Somebody's going to take him out into town and just have fun, whatever. He'll loosen up eventually, blah, blah, blah. She didn't want to see any of the issues. And my dad was like, he needs to be committed, there's something wrong with him, or the army might set him right. And he actually was, for some time during my brother's teenage years, trying to train him, quote unquote, because the draft was no longer in effect in the Netherlands. But he was like, you need to go and apply for the army when you're 18, or whatever age that was supposed to be. And he was going to make him ready for the draft. And there was one holiday where we were in France, and we had this caravan basically, and in the evening we would sit in the caravan and usually play games. But there was one night where my dad literally told my brother to walk back and forth because he was going to help him walk like a normal person instead of getting them some type of therapy or anything like that. They were like, no, you need to just act normal, like that type of thing, which of course annoyed my brother like crazy, because my brother did want to join the military, but he didn't want anybody to comment on how he did things. So there was a half annoyance there during that time where he was trying very hard to walk like a normal person, but he just didn't understand what that meant. And my parents weren't very good at explaining what that meant either, so they just kind of let him swim. And then the moment came where he actually applied to join the army, and the army actually rejected him based on, I think, both physical and mental concerns. Now, I never actually saw what those concerns were, but the physical part, I can definitely tell what that was, probably because of the stiffness and how he moved. Pretty sure it also translated into them taking a second look at what he was like. And I think also due to his fascination with the army and video games that had army themes, that he may have come across a little too eager, and they tend to also not take people on board who want to shoot guns too much. So I'm pretty sure that also played a big role. And then after that, his depression really started. He had a depression beforehand, but it was really, really bad after he got rejected for the army, because the years leading up to that, my dad had kind of told him, you need to go into the army, because if you go into the army, they're going to turn you into a normal person or whatever, functioning person, whatever he told him. And then the moment came and went, and he was actually rejected. So that felt like a rejection on many levels, I'm pretty sure. And he was kind of aimless for a very long time. And he was very resentful towards my dad, and those two lived in the same house for some time, but they rarely saw each other. My brother would spend most of his time in his room playing his games and doing whatever he wanted, which was usually something that my dad probably wouldn't want. Like at one point, he came downstairs into the living room. He's like, "Hey, do we have like one of those spray bottles like for plants and stuff like that?" And my dad's like, "Yeah, there's one under the sink." It's like, okay. So he takes the spray bottle, fills it with water, walks back up the stairs. And my dad was like, "I've never seen him do this. Like, what's going on?" So my dad goes up to see what's going on. And apparently, my brother had a tray of little tea lights, little candles, sitting on top of his wooden storage rack that he had kind of as a dresser or just whatever he wanted to put his stuff on. It sat on top of that, and he had lit like 7 or 8 of those and put them right up against each other. And it had started to leak, and the wax was also burning on the way down. So there's like a whole trail of stuff that was kind of on fire, and he thought that just taking the spray bottle was going to be enough to put out the fire. Now, luckily, they were able to put out the fire through some more drastic measures, so the house was still okay afterwards. But he did have a bunch of singed paper, and of course the rack itself, which was made out of wood, was also singed in certain places. And a bunch of water damage, of course, because it had to be put out. But just his level of thinking there, like, oh, I'm not going to tell him that there's something going on. I'm going to keep that under wraps. I'm just going to ask for something innocuous, like a spray bottle, and not mention anything else about a fire. I'm just going to, like, take care of everything myself, because he didn't want anybody to interfere with his things. Like I said, he was very private, and that went very, very deep with him. He didn't want anybody to know that was like there was anything going on, probably because he also wanted to appear as normal as possible, and having your room on fire was not normal and would probably get some people upset. Like, I'm guessing that that was his level of thinking. And when I came over the weekend after, he kind of like showed it to me, because we were kind of like on a neutral term back then, and he thought it was funny, actually. He thought it was funny that he almost burned down the house, because there was like a lot of paperwork from school, etc. as well along the way down where the wax was falling, so that could have gone up very easily, but he thought it was hilarious. So that is also the point where he started getting his first job, and that's where I said I was going to cut it off for today. We'll get into his work life, etc. later, but a quick recap. He was very stiff in his manners, very stiff in his thinking, very stiff in his view of the world. He was very depressed and aggressive as well. That was a very interesting combination. I had a time where it's like, I need to do something, but on the one hand, if I, like, I don't know, asked to have him checked, for instance, if I had gone to a healthcare provider and say, hey, there's this guy, my brother, and I feel like he might be dangerous, maybe you want to, like, give him a psychological evaluation or something like that. Pretty sure there's some type of system in place where you could have that done to somebody. Don't know what that's called in the Netherlands, but anyway, you know what I mean. The way those people work, it probably would have gone to them going and asking him questions, and this person would have just, like, at surface level gone, well, he seems okay to me, but then the trouble would actually start. That person would leave, and then my brother would be very angry with me, probably, because, or my dad, one of the two, because we had now betrayed him, and the worst thing you could do was call him crazy, even just hint at that there may be something not right with him. That was very, very difficult to process, so that probably would have led to a lot of violent outbursts, potentially very dangerous ones as well. So I never did that, but there was a time where it's like he might start doing things that are very, very bad, and oh, how can I do anything about it? And my conclusion was, I can't. All I can do is hope that nothing actually happens. Nothing did, so that's good. But I was a teenager at the time as well, dealing with two parents who had, like I said, two very different opinions, who were also divorced and probably wouldn't see eye to eye on how to deal with their now almost adult son. So that was a shit show from the beginning. And meanwhile, of course, I have my own neurodivergency going on, so my dealing with things was not quite as ideal, I imagine, as some other people may have been able to deal with things. But, you know, it was a difficult household, and he didn't have a very good time back then either. So in a next video, I probably would like to talk a little bit more about what might have been different had he been diagnosed at the time. Maybe like start a more positive timeline. But for now, I'm going to keep it at this. Hope you found it interesting. Make sure to leave a comment in the comment section below. Helps the channel along if you do that, because that lets YouTube know that other people might want to also watch this video. In any case, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time, and bye for now.